Buying commercial items has always been the favorite child in acquisition reform. Congress loves it, industry loves it, and yet somehow we still make it weird. This is RFO in 5 minutes, and we are unpacking Part 12. Now, the practitioner guide tells us that commercial procedures and terms are now significantly consolidated in Part 12. Now, that's not minor. Simplified procedures have moved entirely into Part 12 for all commercial acquisitions under $9 million. The procedures that used to live in Part 13, gone, relocated. In fact, Part 13 is now renamed Simplified Procedures for Non-Commercial. That's a shift. Part 13 is basically the Shoney's of the FAR. Remember how fun Shoney's used to be? Now it's a red flag that you might be in the wrong part of town. That's Part 13. The fun has moved to Part 12. Now let's start with definitions. FAR 2.101 clarifies that commercial service includes construction. Now, that matters. Agencies forget that construction can qualify as commercial, and that does change the way that you would do Part 36 procedures. And Part 12 only applies if what you're buying actually meets the commercial definition. The smarter you are at that threshold question, the more flexibility you unblock. Spoiler alert, most things the government needs can be bought commercially. We are not as unique as we think we are. I know, it hurts. Another spoiler alert, just because you decide you will buy a commercial item, that doesn't mean you're automatically using Part 12. The applicability section in 12.200 makes that clear. If your need can be met through a Part 8 priority source or existing government-wide contract, like schedules, GWACs, and other best-in-class vehicles, you must use those first. So yes, Part 12 is powerful, unless Part 8 walks in the room. And if these vehicles dominate, standalone Part 12 may become less common. It may increasingly be the lane for commercial services not already captured elsewhere. But either way, at its core, Part 12 implements FASA, the Federal Acquisition Streamlining Act of 1994, pushing government to buy commercial, like the private sector. The RFO doesn't retreat from that, it doubles down. Enter 12.201-1. For acquisitions under $9 million and not using an ordering vehicle, you issue an RFQ followed by a purchase order. That's it. RFQ-to-PO. So if you're under $9 million and you're not on a vehicle, this is your lane now. Everything under $9 million, RFQ-to-PO. Doesn't that feel wrong? Well, the RFO is basically saying, if that's wrong, then baby, you don't want to be right.
And if loving the Lord is wrong, I don't want to be right.
Now, you must solicit at least 3 sources. Yes, 3. Apparently, there was someone out there that kept stopping at 2. Interestingly, that's actually more restrictive than the old Part 13, where 3 sources were customary, but not required. So in some places, the RFO added flexibilities, and others, it tightened things up a little bit. But here's an example of flexibility: standing price quotations. So instead of soliciting new quotes every time, a CEO may rely on standing price quotations as long as the pricing is validated as current and reasonable. Now that could mean using published commercial price lists instead of sending out RFQs for the prices. Imagine that, using actual commercial prices to buy things commercially. It's revolutionary. But operationally though, this is significant. It challenges old habits and encourages different thinking. And this is key. Part 12 now contains ordering procedures. Historically, 12 was used alongside 13 or 15. Now, under $9 million and not in any other vehicle, you don't go anywhere else. Over $9 million? Well, this is where 12.201-2 applies. You use subpart 12.2 in conjunction with Part 15 for RFPs or Part 14 for IFBs. Here's the nuance. Incorporating Part 15 techniques does not automatically turn your procurement into a full-blown Part 15 acquisition. Now, under the old Part 13, if you borrowed too heavily from Part 15, courts might hold you to Part 15 standards. In the old days, if you even whispered competitive range, the court would say, congratulations, you're in Part 15 now. The new Part 12 expressly allows blending. It's no longer this lane or that lane. You can borrow what you need and then you leave the rest behind. Subtle, but impactful. We'll see what the courts say about that one. The structure now mirrors the procurement life cycle like every other new RFO part. 12.1 is pre-solicitation, 12.2 solicitation evaluation award, and then there's post-award, micro-purchase. It's cleaner, it's easier to follow, it's common sense. Evaluation is where this gets interesting. Section 12.203C says that offers should be evaluated efficiently and in a minimally burdensome manner. Yes, we've been saying that since 1984. But there are real shifts here. The COs are not required to create formal evaluation plans, score quotations, establish a competitive range before communicating with quoters. So what's the process? The contracting officer's discretion. As an example, comparative evaluations are specifically called out. That means evaluating quotes against each other instead of scoring them against rigid checklists just one at a time. Now this reduces the need for elaborate source selection machinery. You can still use those tools, but you don't have to default to them. Now, the regulation even encourages innovation to the maximum extent practicable. That language is intentionally open-ended. Now, of course, discretion has guardrails. One of the guiding principles in FAR 1.1026 still requires integrity, fairness, and openness, but there are many creative ways to remain fair and open and efficient. So use your discretion wisely, or don't. That's also discretion. Another major change, the strict late is late rule does not apply. Under 12.203C1, COs exercise business judgment when deciding whether to accept a late quotation. Now that is a departure from rigid timelines carried over from Part 15 into the old Part 13 and into the old ordering procedures. Flexibility is now built in. Okay, quick review. 12.201-1 is everything commercial under 9 million. 12.201-2 is everything commercial over 9 million. Now, post-award notifications also get simplified under 9 million, and they're lighter. Instead of a formal debriefing, you provide a brief explanation. That's under 12.301B. Now, that's streamlined, but remember, commercial vendors often cite a lack of transparency as a barrier. Just because you can be brief doesn't mean you should be silent, and maybe you should provide more information. FAR 52212-3, aka the representations clause that added a cajillion pages to a solicitation, is gone. Managed in SAM now. 52212-5 is gone. That was almost like a clause matrix within a matrix. That's gone. The majority of statutory references embedded in those clauses are no longer required, or they're retained through streamlined means. The result? Roughly a 30% reduction, over 40 clauses eliminated from commercial contracts. That's not cosmetic, that's structural simplification. Follow your agency's class deviations during transition, but the direction's clear. Fewer clauses, more commercial alignment, and more innovation. So what is Part 12 now? Well, it's the consolidated commercial lane. It absorbs much of the old Part 13, thereby adding simplified procedures. It blends with Part 15 when it goes over SAT. It prioritizes innovation, comparative evaluations as an example, and business judgment. It reduces clauses and streamlines procedures. It also gives contracting officers real discretion and explicitly encourages innovation. The regulation is intentionally less prescriptive. Now, the companion guide is there to provide advisory techniques in case you feel lost with all this discretion. But the RFO is opening the door for you, and it just takes understanding your authority that allows you to start empowering yourself to take those steps. Now, join us next time as we continue breaking down the FAR overhaul. We'll post some of these on YouTube, of course, but if you want access to every part, you've got to become a member of ASI Education PRO. Contact us to get started. We'll put a link down below. Till next time.